So, and now we are moving to testing of mobile apps. Yes, welcome.
Hello.
No, I've just put it off out, so stupid of me, but you need to. Yeah. So we are going to talk about testing our mobile apps, and I have only one person here, and that's correct. So I'm just trying to catch up with my notes. So thanks for bearing with me. This session is about mobile app accessibility testing, something that it's kind of a gift that keeps giving. And to give some clarity on this topic, we have invited 3 experts to share their experiences with us from the perspective of industry, research, and monitoring. And we will learn about the background and connection to standards, the user needs that may differ from websites to app, and expectations of users, of course, and finish off with an example from how app accessibility is monitored in Estonia from the Estonian monitoring agency. And there will, of course, be time for questions from the audience after the presentations. And I have here with me on stage Paul from Workum, who is the co-owner and accessibility consultant at ABRA, who are focusing on mobile app accessibility, and you are doing a lot of other things as well, I know. And then we have John Gibbins, and I see your beautiful face here. Hello, joining us from the UK. And John is the managing director of As It Should Be, or the web as it should be, internet as it should be, the whole world as it should be. I can't remember what it is.
Everything as it should be.
Yeah, everything as it should be. Yeah. So he's kind of saving the world. And then we have also with us Harri Puskar who is an expert on digital accessibility in the Estonian monitoring agency. And we will start out with John. And I believe we have your slides. Sorry, I have to do too many things.
Yeah, I think I'm going to share my slides from here, if that's okay. And
don't ask me what is okay or possible, but
well, hopefully you can see my slide now.
Yes. So
okay, perfect.
I'm out of work. That's good, but now we don't see you.
Oh, we can fix that.
Yeah, we need to see you because we need to see this sign language and your face when you're talking.
Hopefully this works as well.
Yeah, I don't know if but that's not your slides.
Why isn't it showing my slides now?
So somebody that is more clever than me should say if this will work with sign language and everything, or if we need to do it from Zoom.
Let's try that again.
Now we have sign language, that is good, but we still don't have your slides.
If this doesn't work, then we can just put do the other slides. Is the sign language not coming up as well?
Not for me, it will, at least. I don't know what people in
Then let's let someone else do the slides.
Yeah.
If that's not going to come up.
Yes. So can we get the slides back? And I'll just.
Yeah, the confusion around my company name is it's called As It Should Be, but the website is digital as it should be. So everything that we do is around digital. But,
perfect. And here we are.
And there we go. We've got some slide deck. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for inviting me here to talk today. The mobile space is not a consistent one or a constant one, and most digital accessibility professionals are experienced with web accessibility and have had to learn to adapt their testing for working with native mobile apps. And the standards and guidelines that we need to conform to are not yet contextual enough to apply cleanly to working on mobile platforms with mobile frameworks and mobile technologies. So there's a level of interpretation currently required when working through accessibility conformance testing. So the European standard EN, if you can go to the next slide, the European standard EN 301-549, which forms the basis of the Web Accessibility Directive requirements, reflects most of the level AA success criteria of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.1. I'll refer to that as WCAG. However, unlike WCAG, EN 301-549 is clear about being applicable to mobile apps. covered by section 11 of the document covering software. But the problem we have, next slide please, is that EN 301-549's clauses refer back to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for understanding how the standards requirements are to be satisfied. And when we try to apply guidelines that are designed for web content to native software, there are bound to be issues. And this is why the W3C's WCAG to ICT task force exists. WCAG uses terminology and measurements that are specific to web technology. They are web guidelines. But both WCAG and EN 301-549 are missing platform-specific context, and such standards cannot take into account all the different user expectations of different native mobile apps and devices and the assistive technologies that are available with them. Next slide, please. For example, take the clause around resized text in EN 301-549. On Android and on iOS mobile platforms, not all items resize when we adjust the user settings, and the user experience is different between each platform. On iOS, text labels in a bottom tab bar do not resize with increasing text settings, and it's likely that it was decided that this is because of restricted space in the interface. It's deliberate behavior, meaning it's expected behavior, particularly for experienced users, which of course not all users are. Instead, users are shown a large preview of the tab item when they hold their finger over them on a touch screen to enable access to larger text version of these items. If we look at Android, however, text labels in the bottom navigation bar do resize with increasing font size settings. So we've got two different experiences here. The two screenshots here show what can happen to text labels as space on the small screen gets reduced by increasing text size. Text starts to get cut off. Again, on Android, on the next slide, sorry, this is the slide that I was hoping to show, and then the next slide again, please. Again, on Android, the title text in a top app bar does not resize with increasing font size settings like with iOS. So there's another difference here where on the same platform, one item will resize, but other items won't. And it's these differences, these nuances that need to be understood before we can effectively interpret accessibility guidelines and standards to mobile environments. Next slide, please. So let's look to the future. Further work's being done on the W3C's WCAG to ICT guidance, and I hope that the issues of terminology and context makes future versions of accessibility standards and guidelines clearer to apply to mobile apps. For example, next slide, please. EN 301-549 does not cover WCAG's target size, as it's a level AAA requirement in version 2.1, and it's out of scope. However, when the standard becomes updated for WCAG 2.2, the newer version that was released last October, it's going to need to cover success criterion 2.5.8 target size, which is a level AA requirement. So whilst the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines talk about CSS pixels in success criteria thresholds, this doesn't clearly map to the units used on mobile platforms like Android and iOS, where we use density-independent pixels and points. EN 301-549 may need to include notes on what the expectation is to satisfy the requirements for software, including mobile apps, in different contexts. Next slide, please. So until then, there's a need to be flexible in how we interpret success criteria and the requirements of EN 301-549 to apply them to native mobile apps, even sometimes interpreting them differently for different platforms. Success criteria can be applied to native mobile apps in the spirit of the intended purpose of the success criterion we're looking at. This gives us permission to establish rationale for what may be considered non-conformance. Thankfully, mobile platforms like iOS and Android are more alike than they have ever been. For example, VoiceOver and TalkBack screen readers on those platforms are more operate in very similar ways now. These platforms continue to mature, which hopefully means more consistency and a more level playing field for creating clearer guidance and techniques for practitioners to build accessible apps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. For this very clear kind of introduction or setting the scene of what the problem is with this, and now something is happening on stage. We are going to dance, or do you want to do this, or should I?
I have a limitation. I have.
Oh, you only have 2 hands. Yeah, okay, that's a limitation. I'm sorry. So thank you, John. That was a very good setting the scene, and I think your kind of your last point here on in the spirit of really points to the user part of this, which leads really nicely into what Paul is going to talk about. So that was very good. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not going to dance. I'm going to discuss things about testing mobile apps as well. My name is Paul Workum. I work at ABRA, and I'm also one of the founders of the ABRA Foundation. Yeah, let's start with the different types. Next slide. Let's start with the different types of apps. Like there are, of course, native apps, native Android, native iOS, and they both have 2 programming languages. You also have hybrid apps, which are a combination of web and apps. And it's quite funny because John already told some examples, but basically inside an app, a list is announced differently in the native part, in the app part, than in the web part. But you only know that because Assistive Technologies is pointing it out to you. Then you also have cross-platform apps. Basically, it's apps that are built, they build iOS and Android apps with one code base. Yeah, basically React Native, Flutter apps. And they also react, although it's the same code base, they react differently on Android and on iOS. So basically, you test differently on iOS and on Android, and it's also different for native, hybrid, and cross-platform. Also, auditors that are doing the audits don't have access to the source code, so they're fully dependent on what the Assistive Technologies is pointing out to them and what they visually see and what they experience. So that's quite a challenge. I only have 8 minutes, very strict, but it means that you can find more on abra.id/apps if you want to know more about it. Mobile apps. Okay, mobile apps include by default a lot of assistive technologies. Around 50% of the users uses assistive features, accessibility features. And on the stats on app.org/en/stats, you can find like more information about that. It's research done in the Netherlands of about 5 million people, around 30%. So it's quite representative. And what it shows is that, let's start with the keyboard interface. What it shows is that screen reader usage is around 0.01 to 0.02%. Screen reader used to read out everything that's on the screen. You have switch control, so you can control your device with buttons or with the joystick or with blinking, moving your head, like different options, but basically it's used by 0.07% of people. You're also able to control your complete device with only a keyboard, an external keyboard. We don't have numbers. And also voice control. You can control your complete device with only your voice. And although the numbers may be not that high, they're very important because the users that are dependent on them, they do not have an alternative. Then there's also larger use cases, like for example, large font size, 1 in 4, dark mode, 1 in 5, really big numbers. And also there's also, I heard something about zoom display sizes, about bold text, can make text bold, and also increased contrast. Those are all used between 5 and 15%. So it's really a lot of people using it. And you need to know how to use these assistive technologies. Otherwise, you don't know how to test an app. There are different ways of testing, and they all have their own benefits and limitations. I go into that a little bit. But basically, you can test the EN standard automated. manual, and also with user testing. And on abra.id/test, you can find more information about this as well. Let's start with automated testing. Automated testing is great for repeating issues. At this moment, there are limited providers, and the results are also different between iOS and Android, and also between the different types of apps. And yeah, you don't have access to the source code, so you cannot test as much as on web. Yeah, we've been working quite some time, but we're really proud to announce that only a few weeks ago we launched ABRA Desktop. Basically, you can test any app on several repeating issues without access to the source code. You don't need developers, and it's really great for monitoring purposes as well. So automated testing, although it's great, can find limited issues that are really often repeating so many times on so many screens, so it can have a big impact. But you cannot test the EN standard with it because it cannot find everything. So you need manual testing as well to get the full picture. Manual testing, you can, yeah, it's quite time consuming because you have to, test with the different assistive technologies. For example, we test with keyboard, text scaling, and screen reader. And you need to have experience with like WCAG, but also with assistive technologies to be able to find the broad spectrum of issues. So basically, the limitations are that it's really time consuming and you're most likely not able to test all the screens, but you are able to test the full EN standard. So it's needed to test manually. Yeah, then user testing. Not that many apps are ready for user testing. It's great for awareness, to create awareness in teams, but basically user testing becomes more important at higher maturity. At this time, I see that automated testing and manual testing is just way more effective to find issues. And in the long run, user testing can improve the experience significantly of users, but at the short run, it's better to start with automated and manual testing. Yeah, what do you need to know? Yeah, you should know the different ways users interact with their devices. Only then you can understand the accessibility features people are dependent on, and are you able to interpret the requirements that are given. Can you go to the next slide? So as an example, to finish up, basically visual impairment. If you have a visual impairment, you're probably dependent on larger font size, maybe also on dark mode. That are the accessibility features that you're dependent on. And then you also have the requirements that are connected to that. So you have, for example, text contrast or element contrast, or like that the larger font size is working correctly according to the guidelines. But you should also understand that, for example, landscape mode, it's also one of the requirements. It's also connected to the larger font size, because in landscape mode, you can like read text better because there are multiple words on each line. So you should understand the requirement, but you should also understand how the accessibility feature is working in order to make it good for the end user. Next slide. The last example that I want to give is the people with a motorical impairment. They're dependent on that the keyboard is working, that switch control is working, that voice control is working. And the requirements connected to that is that the keyboard interface is working, that there's no obstacles, and that the focus moves from left to right, top to bottom of the screen. So basically, to interpret the requirements, I think Jon said it as well, you need to understand the features in order to do the right things for the end user. That was my story for today. Thanks for listening, and yeah, let's make more apps accessible.
Thank you, Paul. That was very useful information and also very clearly described. So thank you. It was a little bit of pity that you didn't dance, but still. And after, yeah, exactly next time. I'll give you more time if you dance. And I like really the logic of you need to understand the user needs in and other things to be able to understand the standards, because that is what sometimes irritates me when people says it's difficult to read the standard. Yes, it is, but you can't just open it from scratch and know nothing about anything and believe that you can understand the standard. So I really like that idea of connecting understanding the user needs and the features and the guidelines. So thank you for that tip or kind of logic of that. So do we have our last speaker? Yes, we have. Harri Puskar, welcome, the digital accessibility expert or expert on digital accessibility, I think, from the Estonian Monitoring Agency. And after we have now learned from the accessibility experts here about how testing can be done, should be done, what the problems are now, let's hear what is actually happening in the monitoring from, as an example, in Estonia. We're very interested to listen to what you have to say.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can we have the slides, please?
Yes, I tried to show them myself, but if it isn't possible, yeah.
So please, floor is yours.
So do you see the slides and myself also?
No, we do not see your slides yet.
You do not see my slides yet. Okay, let's try
Now I
it
think
again.
they are. Now we see your slides. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. It was some kind of lag between Brussels and Estonia. Okay, but as Susanna told, I am Harri Puskar and I work for the Estonian Consumer Protection and Technical Regulatory Authority as an expert on digital accessibility. And the authority is the Estonian Monitoring, Reporting and Enforcement Authority for the Web Accessibility Directive. And I am going to outline some key points on how mobile app testing is done within the WAD framework in Estonia. So let's start with the Estonian approach to the annual in-depth monitoring exercise of mobile apps. And to keep things short, I focus only on some features. A framework for the monitoring exercise is standing on the relevant Commission implementing decision, and as an outcome of the annual monitoring, the authority releases a report at the end of each year on its website. Next, the authority outsources testing to external experts. For example, this year, the authority held a public procurement to select a private company that is carrying out the accessibility testing in May and June, and testing is done from the end of June to the end of September. And at the end of September, the authority will review the test findings to ensure that test results are correct. The evaluation partner uses a monitoring methodology that is provided by the authority, and user tests are not included in it. In addition, the authority is unable to provide an overview of how much Estonian public sector bodies have done user tests, as it hasn't investigated it. However, the authority highlights for those who implement accessibility requirements that user feedback is essential to take into account. Moving forward, cooperation with mobile app owners is mostly constructive. Before testing, the authority notifies them about the monitoring exercise, and after reviewing the test results, the authority sends the results to them to ask for feedback. That is, the authority is asking for a plan outlining how they intend to fix accessibility issues that have been found. The authority discloses in the annual report also whether feedback has been submitted. And for example, by the time the report was released last year, we had received feedback about every mobile app in the last year's sample. I will now turn to my next subject, which is an overview about the Estonian monitoring methodology. For the in-depth monitoring of mobile apps, the authority uses and gives evaluators to use an assessment form which combines detailed accessibility testing methodology with fields to mark test results and write notes about non-compliances for each screen in the sample of assessed mobile app screens. Unfortunately, At the moment, the form exists as a very complex Excel table, but the authority has made an effort to make methodology as functional as possible and is willing to help any stakeholder who needs advice in using it. In addition, the authority plans to develop a more user-friendly equivalent web application that will replace the current assessment form for Estonian stakeholders who have to evaluate the compliance with accessibility requirements. Secondly, the evaluation process used in Estonia is manual testing with several stages, such as simple screen examination, use of tools like making a screenshot and testing color contrast with respective tool, keyboard and screen reader tests, etc. The monitoring methodology includes a test for every clause listed in Table 8.2 of EN 301-549. The table lists clauses relevant for implementation of the essential requirements of WAD. In other words, a mobile app confirms with WAD if it meets the requirements listed in the table. In fact, the authority is well aware of the ambiguity of some EN standard requirements that go beyond WCAG. The authority applies a narrow interpretation to these requirements and takes action only if it finds accessibility issues that clearly violate these requirements. But how has the Estonian methodology come to be in this state over the years, and what have been the ways for dealing with the challenges? Based on my experience, I can conclude that working together with EU member states monitoring authorities is likely the most important when it comes to addressing challenges. We all face the same struggles. Usually someone has already found the solution and the wheel doesn't need to be reinvented. For instance, the authority began to draft the Estonian methodology in 2021 based on the EN standard, WCAG, input from Estonian evaluators, etc. One of the most useful tools we had back then was a Swedish testing manual, and I'm still thankful to my Swedish colleagues for sharing it. The second thing is the implementation of the methodology on a daily basis and refining it if necessary. The authority has used that methodology each year for the annual exercises and for other supervision cases, and it has shared the methodology with every stakeholder who has been interested in evaluating their own mobile app. And finally, taking part in the standardization process. As a member of the relevant working group, I have been actively involved in the work on the update of the EN standard over the past 1.5 years, and I have brought unresolved problems to the standardization process. As an example of it, I'm going to speak about the requirement 11.523 of the EN standard. The requirement as it is now seems to be primarily intended for summarizing other requirements and describing the same non-compliance twice. I brought up the problem in various working spaces of the standardization process and teamed up with a colleague to conduct a profound analysis of the issue. As a result, we understood that the requirement is essential since it gives clear guidance for developers, yet it makes sense to modify it as such so that WAD monitoring authorities won't have to test it. The working group agreed with the amendment and the incorporation of the amended version into the new version of the EN standard. And thank you for listening. Please feel free to contact me and I would be happy to answer any questions during Q&A session. Thank you.
Very much. And it's good to hear about the sharing of knowledge and also that monitoring agencies have time despite their schedule to participate in standardization. We would be welcoming more people to that, and in the GitLab link that you shared there is also a possibility for everyone to follow the work of the EN 301-549 review, and also to make comments there. So please do engage in that work as well. So we have got some questions from the audience here. And the first one is there a tendency to move information from websites to apps, leading to less accessible information for users, since website owners are not as good in making apps accessible? Have you seen any trends in this direction? Maybe Paul?
Yeah, like what I see is that for websites, you have more automated testing tools. So websites are like, it's easier on the website to make it accessible, because with websites, you only have one programming language, and with apps, you have like maybe 10. If you have an accessible website, you can import a lot of the content in an app. And if you do it technically well, it's like also by default accessible. But what I see is that apps have really special needs. Like if you have an identification app and you can put your passport with an NFC against your phone, then that's the only way to do it. And then it should be accessible. And yeah, we have in our foundation a reporting app. And what I see is that if you have a thermostat that's connected to your app, there's no website that can do that. And then it's really, really excluding people. So I don't see that apps are better. I see that apps normally are worse, because there's like limited options, and it's harder for developers to make apps accessible. And for a website, there's like, also I saw that like one of the users was saying today, with a website you have like more alternatives. With an app, and if it's not working in an app, yeah, it's not working. And with the website, you have like ways to bypass it as well.
So Harri, from the monitoring perspective, do you see, I mean, in the monitoring methodology, you do check fewer apps than you check websites, obviously, so you wouldn't have a statistically viable truth here, but your kind of gut feeling, is there a move between website and apps or towards apps? And do you see one of them being more or less accessible? Do you have any views on that?
Interesting case that we have seen in Estonia is that actually many apps are going to more mirror websites, and they are like actually only mirror versions, and these native apps we don't test as much as these so-called mirror apps, and this is the Estonian case at the moment. We don't have that kind of situation where webs are not so accessible, and everyone are starting to make like native apps. We have a totally different situation.
Okay, so John, did you have anything to add on that? Do you see any trends from the UK perspective?
Only that I feel that there is scope, that there is opportunity in the mobile space. That they're different platforms, and yes, I agree with what the other speakers have said. But with some technologies, like how we define user interfaces in mobile apps, there are more inherent relationships in how we code those user interfaces now, where on the web, I guess we've had more time to understand what the issues are and actually have techniques for improving accessibility. And this has been a big gap on mobile for a long time, and it's something that I'm really thankful to ABRA and the App Foundation for doing, is providing techniques and examples for how to make things accessible. But yeah, I think the trends, yeah, I agree with the others here, that there is additional complexity, especially around things like cross-platform frameworks that can put more hurdles in place than perhaps there should be. But I think the fundamental issue with accessibility on both mobile and on the web is one of education and actually having the awareness of what accessibility is and what to do about it, because the research out there says that 95+% of websites are inaccessible, and I would say probably it's similar on mobile. So the problem goes back to general awareness and education around what needs to be done to make something accessible or not.
But you started off kind of positive, saying that it will mature and it will become better when we all learn more about apps. It will hopefully be better. I have kind of stuck with that one because it sounded positive.
Yeah, I do hope that that's the case, and I certainly feel like with the platforms becoming more similar and how we build apps becoming more resilient, more robust. Then my hope is that it will be easier to make things accessible, but we're still in this period of transition.
Yeah, sure. Did you want to comment, Paul?
Yeah, I want to add something to that. Like what you see on the website parts, that like with crazy design systems, with a lot of techniques in WCAG, it's like quite, yeah, there's quite a lot of resources. And what I see in apps is that it's like, in the Netherlands at least, it's like a little bit less than 10%. Like, so each 10 websites have only one app, meaning that it's like not getting a lot of enough attention. And besides that, if you have like, for example, a design system, like great, you can prevent a lot of issues. But then it has also a design system has components, and those components you need for apps to write them in like 10 different programming languages. So maybe it's nice to, because it's like only like 10% and 10 times as hard. So it's 100 times as hard. Maybe we should like group together and like find ways, like what we do with websites as well, to make it life easier of developers and designers and testers. Let's do it with apps as well.
Yeah, I like that. Let's do that. Another question is, and I think this is for Harri, is does the directive require the same level of accessibility for websites and apps, or are there differences?
The directive requires same level of accessibility, that is that same EN 301/549 Annex A that lists requirements for webs and for mobile apps, and actually these two lists are very similar in their composition. Basically, the requirement is the same for webs and apps.
Thank you. And I don't know if we have any questions in the room. I forgot to yes, we have somebody waving there. Can we have a microphone? Yes, thank you. No, just one microphone, please, not two microphones, Thomas. No. Yes.
Is it me first? I'm Adela Bullyman from Ireland. I'll stand up, sorry, Paul, so you can see me. And I was kind of wondering how we deal with the fact that apps don't have the same capabilities. So like if you're reviewing and okay, the heading levels are not there because you can't build them in on Android and there's Zoom issues and so on, is that a fail in the standard? Do we say it's non-applicable because you're not able to implement it even if you wanted to? Or like how would you do that if you're reviewing an app, I guess?
So is this a question for the industry or for the monitoring agency?
This is for anyone that knows the answer.
Okay. Do you want to respond? Yeah.
Yeah, in apps, you have headings. You can mark text as heading, but then it's like heading, no heading, heading, no heading. And there's no levels like on the website. Like in the beginning with the Corona apps, like Jan-Jaap, my technical, the guy that did everything, like all technical things, he basically built a solution that you can like, that it exactly announces it as on a website. But then he spent around 100 hours to build that. And then someone said, okay, but then we should translate it as well to 15 languages, like Arab, like really. And then he said, okay, it just cost so much money that we said, okay, what we can also do is to just change it. That in this case, it was lists that like announced like separately. Like if a list is announced separately, you can like, what are your symptoms? I sneeze, I have sore throat. So if it reads out as one block, then we think it's wrong because you want to, it's like bullets for a reason, and then it's fine. And that's what we agreed on in the Netherlands now, that if it's a list and it's like read separately, if it heading text is a heading, marked as heading, then it's fine. But it also means that like the EN standard has, if you would have one heading level, that would not be really like user friendly.
Yeah.
But the criteria says, is it a heading, yes or no? So you always have to go back to like what's intended. Like, is it operable? Is it understandable? Is it like the principles of WCAG? And most likely then it's a user experience thing. So you should test with users like, okay, if we have the IEN standard with only one heading level, maybe you should find like solutions to fix that instead of making it the technical solution, because it just takes so much hours from developers, and it will not be, users don't expect in an app to have this experience as well. So it's like complicated, but if we do it in the Netherlands on one way and in another country a different way, and then another auditing firm does it differently, that's complicated.
That's what the case is right now. But I think John said this very nicely in that kind of in the spirit of, so think about what was intended and what the user really wants. But I want to ask Harri, so how would you see this in Estonia from a monitoring perspective? I mean, now it's one industry player and one monitoring agency, so probably we could have 50 other responses to this, but just as an example.
As an example, you can test headings with the screen readers in the mobile apps, and actually you don't need a direct access to mobile code. You can test everything with assistive technologies and etc. And basically, this is you're getting the same experience as user is getting, but you have to be aware how user is like making things in mobile apps, and this is something actually what Paul told, that you need to be aware how user is using assistive technologies, how user is making things in mobile apps and etc. But you can test in conclusion actually almost every requirement with assistive technologies in mobile apps.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have a question from...
May I come in there a moment, Susanna?
Okay. Half a minute. You have 30
Sorry,
seconds.
I was just going to add that this is where the standard and practicalities kind of can be different, because and different platforms, because on iOS you can now specify heading levels. So you've got headings, but you can also set levels. But whether there's too many headings or not enough, or like one heading, or I think Paul just said this, if there's one heading on a screen, that's not going to be helpful. But if you've got a lot of content, breaking that down can be helpful. So you can do headings on one platform. You can do different levels of headings to an extent. On Android, you can't. So it's really about understanding the platform and understanding what is the requirement from the standards point of view versus what can I do. So when I'm reporting, I will say, okay, well, this doesn't meet the standards, but this is what you could do from a best practice point of view. And that best practice is different on iOS to what it would be on Android.
Making life difficult for all of us. So did we have another question from the audience? I think Alejandro wanted to, This needs to be short, Alejandro.
Okay, I'll do my best. So very quickly, from the user's point of view, I mean, back then when the Commission launched the proposal for the directive, apps were not there. And it was mostly our members, European Blind Union and us, EDF, we were pushing for having the apps on, was the boom of apps back then. And I believe still many people with disabilities do prefer the app because of what the users panel discussed before, because of this overload of content on webs. And as for usually apps, they have their core functionality. Usually they are lighter in terms of content, more focused on the task that you want to achieve on the app. So even if maybe on the website you have more alternative, many people still prefer to use the app. Having said that, I wanted to ask, because I didn't understand what you said about the not having access to the code of the app. Would having access to the code of the app facilitate the monitoring? And if so, I believe that public sector bodies will be able to share the code of their apps with the monitoring agency, no? That would be possible or not? Or maybe I'm missing something here.
Yeah, this was not an easy question, but I'll get give Paul the floor. If you can do this in one sentence, please.
Yeah, on the website, you can like click right and inspect, and then you see exactly how it's built. With an app, you just like, I can just put it on the screen reader, and it's like a crazy example, but like there's like in Android, in the heading, it's very hard to announce it as button. So now we have like ABRA desktop, and we can go to the element, and then we see that in the name of the element, it's called like menu, comma, button. It's the name. And then the trait, like the role, is empty. So basically, the developer did not add a role. That's basically a WCAG issue, because you should add a role so that the assistive technologies can understand what it's doing. But
the question was, shouldn't the public sector bodies share the source code? I think that was the question.
Yeah, like
is that possible?
I work for
So I think we put this to the monitoring agency instead. Harri, do you have a view on this?
Yes, it's actually quite hard to get access to every mobile app code on our framework, and it's more feasible to learn how users are using assistive technologies, mobile apps, etc., and to make evaluations with assistive technologies with simple screen examinations, etc.
Okay, John is nodding, so I think you're all in agreement on that. It's technically difficult, and therefore we kind of work with a workaround instead. I think that's kind of the non-technical response to that. So thank you, everyone. It's time for coffee break again. Thank you to the distinguished panelists. Very well done. Tricky issue, but you have been explaining it very, very well. So thank you for that, and thanks for the questions. And now we have a 15-minute break. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.